critical point in intrauterine life. This was how it was defined earlier. And placenta is the one which assumes a very, very important role in programming the fetal experience in utero due to the adaptive changes in structure and function. It's the placenta which does it. In recent years, a lot of research is going on and it is still in progress because this is a very dynamic and new subject, fetal programming. It is looking at the kind of process that causes the fetal programming, and it is a real scientific challenge. Now coming to some of these staggering statistics. Non-communicable disease is a major health problem. It is said that 68% of all deaths are due to non-communicable diseases. Now, 2 out of 3 deaths globally are due to non-communicable diseases. The list is there, starting from diabetes down to Alzheimer's disease, are all clubbed under this group. Like the director of WHO said, we are facing a slow motion disaster. A pandemic of NCDs is going to come or has just begun. Take 2 of the most important diseases or disorders. Diabetes is on the rise. In 2015, around 400 million people were suffering from diabetes, and by 2040, it will be crossing or reaching around 650 million. India is poised to be the diabetic capital in a very few years of time. And the ones who are most affected are the countries of less resource or developing countries. Take obesity. 1.5 billion adults are suffering from overweight or obeseness. Pediatric children, nearly about 43 million children under the age of 5 are overweight, obese. So this is the mammoth size of this problem which we are facing. Now what is this? This great man called Philip Barker in the UK proposed the hypothesis of fetal origin of adult diseases. That is how it was called. He had access to impeccably maintained records of people who were born between 1911 and 1915. And in the late 70s and early 80s, he found the records, birth records of these people. We should admire them. If there is one shortcoming in Indian medical system, is documentation and preservation of records. There is a long way for us to go in this aspect. So this man looked at those records and he came up with this hypothesis. There is a positive correlation between neonatal morbidity of people born between that age years and the deaths from ischemic heart disease in the same group in the 1970s. He proposed negative correlation between birth weight and deaths from ischemic heart disease. He said undernutrition in fetal life and low birth weight program cardiometabolic disorders in adulthood. I must say, like in Ramayana, you know the squirrels which are supposed to have collected fruits and given to the soldiers and Lord Rama during the building of the Sri Lankan, during the building of the Ramasetu. Same way, I was a SHO in Southampton General Hospital in the 1980s. I didn't know, we were given some records to extract information from that. And later on I realized that it was Philip Barker who was analyzing this information and he came up with this Barker's hypothesis. So this is a small role which I had played in the Barker's hypothesis of that time. Senior house officer, don't get it, it's a misnomer. Senior house officer is the junior most person in the department, and I was that at that time. Barker then called it the thrifty phenotype. Fetal life, there is vascular compromise, there is undernutrition, and he said that is associated with disorders in the adult life, namely hypertension, insulin resistance, hyperleptinemia, increased adiposity and delayed puberty. So it was just an association at that time. And as time progressed, things were added to it. Maternal hyperglycemia, other maternal placental influences were added, and the fetal infant malnutrition led to changes in very important end organs or large organs like kidney, pancreatic beta cells, muscle, adipose tissue, and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this was seen as a cause for producing hypertension, renal failure, adult beta cell function, and insulin resistance. And later on, it was named as Metabolic Syndrome. The birth progressed further, the flow diagram kept changing. So now they found there are other conditions like maternal dietary intakes, placental transfer, fetal genome, all this influenced nutritional demand was more than the supply. Fetal undernutrition took place, and they said that led to several changes like hypoxemia by redistribution of blood flow, metabolic changes which resulted in increased amino acid oxidation, increased lactate oxidation, and decreased glucose oxidation. They also said there were endocrinal changes, increase in cortisol, increase in insulin, decrease in growth hormone, and they said that these are the mechanisms which led to fetal programming, and this was now termed as fetal adaptations to undernutrition. Still the main thrust was on nutrition. Now later on the terminology changed and it became developmental origins of health and disease, known as DOHAD. From fetal origins of adult disease, it has become developmental origins of health and disease, and few conditions like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity were explained by this. Barker also, during his active working life, said that it's not just the low birth weight, but other extremes of birth weight, which is high or what you call as large for gestation age, also is associated with conditions like type 2 diabetes, etc., etc. So there was always already a development in the theory. Now at this juncture came the term epigenetics. To put it simply, genetics is the study of heredity. Genetics looks at the expression of the genetic code. Epigenetics is the study of how the expression of a DNA can be changed without altering or touching its structure. Epigenetics is the study of the other factors that influence how and when a gene is expressed. So it is very important for us to be clear about what epigenetics is. After much research in epigenetics, the current hypothesis on the development of origin of health and disease was proposed. What it says is during early life, at conception and or during fetal life, infancy, and early childhood. Look here how the age group has expanded now. The environment induces changes in the development that have long-term impact on the later health and diseases and the risk of diseases. So now it encompasses a larger period and more influence on early development, leading to changes which will result in late problems. So this is the comprehensive development origins of health and disease. As you can see, the factors have expanded: maternal nutrition, maternal disease, environmental exposure, which is very important, maternal BMI and lifestyle, and stress, all during the first few years of life, not after that. First few years of life, different. It was only fetal, now it has become first few years. So fetal programming takes place and the mechanisms are varied, but ultimately the adaptation which was required to continue living had its toll. That resulted in insulin resistance, hyperglycemia, dyslipidemia, leptin resistance, and like that in the cardiovascular system, and others including cancer, premature aging, even psychiatric disorders, Alzheimer, structural changes, and reproductive system. I'll come to that later. Pubertal development. Everything now is thought to be, if there are any disorders, were actually due to programming which took place in the early few years. Now I am moving on to some of the recent things which have come to light. Alarming, but still being researched. For example, we salvage, due to the increase in the development of technology, improvement in expertise and treatment modalities, we are salvaging more and more preterm babies. Look at that. In the fetal life, or when the baby is in utero, chorioamnionitis, intrauterine growth restriction, maternal hypertension and gestational diabetes, especially the last one which is in the increase, all these have an effect on the growing fetus. Not just that, after the baby is born, in the postnatal period, the associated morbidities like sepsis, lung injury, brain injury, undernutrition, mechanical ventilation, in brackets, use more of non-invasive ventilation, parenteral nutrition, and some of the treatment of these disorders like antenatal steroids, prevention, these also have an effect on the later life. So, common adverse intrauterine conditions that may trigger the preterm birth, common complications related to prematurity, and some of the ill effects of the treatment itself all have a major role in altering the organ system development. So this is a little bit alarming, and we have to sit and think. Long-term disorders related to preterm birth, higher blood pressure, these have been observed. Some of them, the mechanisms are known, some of them, the research is still on. Higher blood pressure, altered response to stress can be affected, altered renal function, reduced glucose tolerance, reduced bone density, even asthma and airflow obstruction, personality and behavior distance, immunology and allergy, and later on the reproductive life. We know all these can be affected by a baby being born very prematurely. Look at this very, very interesting graph. See the line on top is the preterm cohort, the STA cohort. The line in middle is the preterm cohort, and the line below is the STA cohort. See how STA and preterm together cause more problems, and see the top line, the comparison cohort is doing very well. So what I am saying is preterm and being SGA is double trouble. Now we move on to another very important aspect. We see that lot of babies are born due to assisted reproduction techniques. Now this has a lot of bearing on the diseases of health, disorders of health and diseases in later life. From embryo to adults is the perspective here. In vitro fertilization and other reproductive technologies are not totally safe. IVF and ICSI is intracytoplasmic sperm injection, one of the techniques of assisted reproduction, present a nutritional and biochemical and hormonal environment which is different from natural conception. The dynamic conditions in the genital tract is lost with IVF. This procedure introduces variables, novel variables, and recent data suggests that ART is an example of fetal programming. The oldest IVF conceived person, as you can see her photo there, is Louis Brown, who is just turned 40. So our research here, by the time we thought that we have to look at IVF products or offsprings, may have started about 20 to 30 years ago, and there are a lot of information is coming to light. IVF conceived adolescents present modest but significant differences in growth kinetics. We should remember that. Fat deposition, blood pressure and glucose levels are different than children conceived spontaneously. ICSI children, there is evidence for an early adverse cardiometabolic profile. Children's babies born by ICSI. ICSI conceived children are known to have latent insulin resistance. This has been recently researched. So look at the risks there. Even the systolic and diastolic pressure is higher in babies born by assisted reproduction techniques. Blood pressure and fasting glucose differences could not be explained by any other factor. May it be the current body size when they are diagnosed, or the parental and other early life factors by parental characteristics, or by the treatment for the subfertility. These could not be explained. They thought that this is another example of fetal programming. If you look at the systemic and pulmonary vascular dysfunction in children conceived by ART, that is subnormal, suboptimal. So another finding has come to light. Flow-mediated dilatation of the brachial artery and carotid femoral pulses wave velocity are all changed, and the structure of the intima is not perfect in babies who are born with ART. Imprinting disorders, increased incidence from about 3 to 10 times in the normal population or compared to the babies born spontaneously. Syndromes like Silver Russell, Beckwith-Whiteman, Prader-Willi, Angelman, these are all imprinting disorder syndromes. They are higher in incidence in ART due to fetal programming. Neoplasms in pediatric age group. This is a little bit scary. The incidence of neoplasm in vitro fertilization is about 2.5 times more. If it is even just ovulation induction by using medication, it's about 1.5 times more. And assisted reproduction technique, whichever way you use, in singular or in combination, increases the incidence of childhood malignancies. Again, explained by fetal programming. The other important thing which has come to notice is the response is not the same in boys and girls who have suffered from fetal programming due to certain causes. Now, in utero stressed males develop more hyperactivity because there is an alteration of expression of dopamine and dopamine receptors. Placental cardiovascular axis. If you look at the Dutch famine research, people who were born during the Dutch famine and after that grew normally or had more to eat, definitely had hypertension. Similar relationship was not evident in women born during that period. So the people during the Dutch famine, the males suffered from hypertension due to fetal programming and not so much the females. So there is a difference in the gender who are susceptible to what disorder due to fetal programming. Placental surface plays a large part in working out odds ratio as to who will be the sufferers. Look at this. Low birth weight female adolescents suffered from depression, but the males were partially spared from this effect of fetal programming. So there is definitely a difference between the two genders. Animal studies have also shown this. Rat offsprings born to mothers on a low protein diet, the males became hypertensive and not the females. Another interesting outcome of fetal programming research is that the changes can be transgenerational, not just one generation, but it can have effect even up to 3 generations. Look at this, the maternal metabolic syndrome and mitochondrial dysfunction across 3 generations of mice. The maternal metabolic syndromes programs the mitochondrial dysfunction and it can last for 3 generations. The maternal mice were on a high sugar during the time of weaning, then a normal diet for 3 generations. So the next 2 generations were fed normal diet. It's the 2 generations back they have fed those mice with high sugars. But metabolic syndrome was passed to the 3rd generation mice. Affected offsprings had mitochondrial dysfunction and various genes have been implicated in that. So this is another very alarming fact that it can be transgenerational. This is another interesting observation. Now the grandmother was smoking during her antenatal period. Now she has grandchildren of adolescent age group, but the mother was not smoking, but still you can find the after effects of that in the subsequent generations. At the bottom, the summary is the offspring of non-smoking women showed difference in anthropometry between those whose generation smoked prenatally compared with those who did not. Very, very interesting. So now the fetal programming hypothesis has been even more refined. Lot of paternal effects, but that is environmental. But maternal effect is through genomes have been found, and the newer hypothesis is going to come again next year. There are many other examples of fetal programming. As you can see, maternal sex steroid pathway is associated with behavior problems in male offsprings, and head circumference at birth again because of fetal programming is altered. The one very important thing which has come to light is oxidative fetal programming and oxidative stress. The hypoxic ischemia and the chorioamnionitis inflammation, these are all causes for oxidative stress in the mother in the antenatal period, and that has been found to have lot of ill effects due to fetal programming. Consequently, oxidative stress may be the key link underlying the program. It works via the nitric oxide pathway. So this is being researched very, very heavily currently. Future directions in fetal programming, there are a lot of things which we don't know. Until now, epidemiological studies have been concentrating on adults. Now, do we have to use see these effects even in the children? Only some systems have been investigated. There are other systems, and interaction between chemicals, nutrition and stress is very, very important. Intergenerational windows have to be further researched. Better integration of animal studies and clinical studies have to be correlated. Currently, the health of fetus is considered more important because the birth trends are low and late childbearing is common. Keeping all this in mind, fetal programming becomes a very, very, very important aspect in adulthood disorders and diseases. The famous William Osler once commented during a graduation ceremony, "Congratulations, you are all becoming doctors. But please remember, 50% of the things which you have taught during your studentship in the next very few years may be found to be wrong or irrelevant. But the sad part is we don't know which half is that." So that is the situation we are considering fetal programming. We have lot of associations, some of the mechanisms and some of the clinical proofs or observations. In the next few years, I am sure fetal programming will answer a lot of questions. What I want to see is, because of this education, you should be able to work out prevention and early intervention strategies. Only then the fetal programming research will serve its purpose. Thank you.